Welcome to the Strength Culture Podcast.
I hear him chat to the noise, move too quick, can't stop for the talking. I hear him chat with the boys, man so tough, but man's keep caution.
What's going on with you, dude?
Not much.
Working
Just,
hard? Hardly working?
Working hard, but I'm in the home space now. We got a setup out back, which has been nice. I've been bouncing around different gyms in town. I mean, you know what I mean? Like the accommodating to go in and like shoot some videos and like do some stuff is pretty hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been kind of bouncing around too, to be honest with you. Like I've been training. Well, obviously, I broke my leg. So I've been training here, doing what I can do here. But then I've just I've been on like this bodybuilding machine training kick for like probably 6 fucking weeks. And I got to say, it feels good.
Oh yeah. Good. And well, especially when you go through a little setback like that too, it's good to get yourself in a different environment and just, we've had this conversation when you had that injury we were talking about. I mean, you have so many options.
Yeah. And it's just better to have those options. Like, cool. Like I have to pivot to like a slightly different, but I love it. I'm loving every second of it, Yeah. Cause it's a little out of my wheelhouse, but it's the same thing, it's the same thing, just a little bit different tools to do it. And, in fact, definitely like able to really push it in terms of actually really being able to train to like absolute failure, not just technical failure, but like absolute muscular failure for about 4 to 6 weeks. And I've definitely seen some physique changes and, no, it's been fun. It's been fun. Yeah. Yesterday I scale weighed 230. That's the heaviest I've ever scale weighed ever in my entire life.
That's amazing.
But I don't feel 230, which is good because my conditioning's in, my cardio's in. Even though I haven't been able to like run, I've been doing tons of biking. And
this is like, I mean, even this topic here is maybe a good place to start because it's something you gain over time. Like and this is where a lot of people struggle with those first stages of injury or the first time something like that's happened to them, especially if their training age and training history is not very broad. And it's a kind of a good conversation for you and I to have at this point in our like training careers and coaching careers is like we've tried and gone through so many different types of disciplines and things like that transition is very easy.
Yeah.
And then when you get into that conversation of people sometimes thinking there's like a finish line when it comes to fitness, it's like, well, there's never going to be a finish line. There's these transitions and it's all based off of that broad scope of experience that you have.
Yeah.
So that's really, I think, what a lot of people need when they go through those moments of like, I can't do what I did before, they fall, they relapse. It's like, just like transition, try something different. And like, you're making gains, your legs out of commission right now. It's like,
there's like obviously like heavy specialization, but there's also just like, at the end of the day, all this training accumulates to the bigger thing, right? Like it doesn't matter really the style or what discipline of training you use, whatever you want to call it, powerlifting, weightlifting, bodybuilding, CrossFit, hybrid, like it all just cardio training, like it all accumulates towards the same thing over time. And it's like, I mean, there might be people new to our relationship on this podcast. So we can always kind of like maybe, because I was literally thinking before I got on, I was like, where do we start this podcast? Right? Because you and I haven't had a conversation like this in some time. Like we've obviously done the podcast with Emmett, but you and I go way back. And I don't think people will realize how far back that we go. Like more than anyone, like people know, obviously my involvement with ATG, like that's probably where most of people are going to know me from. There's still a handful of people that I communicate today that remember us from even prior to that, which is kind of cool. But, we're going on like, it's got to be 8 or 9 years.
Yeah. And we met, what's cool about where we met too is we met through this transition period where we were starting to dive deep into flexibility.
Yep.
And that's what was so cool is like the evolution of our flexibility. It came at a time where we had just started doing it and we were networking. We were trying to find other people doing it. And I was like, I need to find like a jacked dude.
Another dude, yeah.
And it's like you start like that's what's so great about social media. You find people doing unconventional things, and
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like, yeah, I found you at that time. You were training in the park, doing a lot of
Park still.
calisthenics.
Yep.
Yeah, and I was trying to learn calisthenics too, so it was kind of a good transition to like find you and then start talking about flexibility training and being like, oh man, like I gotta hook up with this guy and we gotta, just being
Yeah.
connected. Yeah, it's been a long time, and
what's crazy is in that time, there have been very, very few days, probably literally could count it on both of our hands, that we have not had a daily communication. Like,
Yeah.
like we have talked to each other every single day in that window of time. So there's probably been no one in my entire life that's been more consistent in other than my parents or whatever growing up, but like in my adult life, that's like, especially in my, like in this career, like in this path, than you. Right. So it is very interesting because we know everything, right? Everything.
Yeah.
So it's like, because we share everything and we have bounced those ideas back and forth on each other for almost, approaching a decade. Before we know it, it will be a decade, which is crazy to think.
Yeah, it's been cool
because
to
I
watch
still remember when we connected, which is wild. So
yeah,
it's we go quite a ways, and there have been transitions. It's like I just shared that video with you yesterday.
Yep.
Me doing the muscle ups. I was so skinny, dude. I weighed 30 pounds less than I weigh right now. But dude, I thought I was so jacked. I thought I was so.
It's a different type of jack, right?
It is just a different
big.
type. It is just
Yeah,
a different
there's
type.
still an aesthetic look to it where you're like, man, like, because I look back, I was shaped a lot differently
Still
too.
more jacked than most people, right? So
yeah, well, you just kind of like look and you're like, that's a different look. I wonder if I can still get that. Because
yeah, is it just like an accumulation of the training to that point, or and now it's like just okay, like 15 years in the gym now, you're just gonna look different. You're just gonna look different. Like that's just the way it is, I've
thought about like maybe I've thought about making a post like that too, where it's like I've had this aesthetic when I started powerlifting. Like at my leanest in powerlifting, I was pretty lean when I started, but I was powerlifting. And it's kind of like then sharing the gymnastics journey and sharing that aesthetic, and then like sharing where I'm at now with like the weird shit I've been doing. It's like they all kind of look the same. I just look a bit older, but it's just funny how people obsess about,
I would say older, but I would say there's a maturity in your physique that's like you can't duplicate. Like I think that's like I think this is actually a fantastic freaking place to start, because like obviously a lot of people maybe didn't know you used to be a powerlifter. Like it's funny because when you're in social media, you have to constantly remind yourself that like new people are always coming in. So not everyone knows like your whole kind of story. They're just kind of seeing where you're at right now. And so like maybe we can, yeah, exactly. So it's like you were a powerlifter and a competitive powerlifter at that. And so maybe you can kind of just briefly, I know it's like such a long, but like that's sort of where it started more or less for you, right? Like obviously other than just the banging weights in the gym, but that was kind of like your initial sort of main, I guess, like outlet in terms of like physical fitness or physical development, right? It was mostly powerlifting.
Yeah, I think I mean,
you were an athlete, but
yeah, I was a lazy athlete though. I was like, I say this to everyone all the time. I was the dickhead that showed up for dryland and just like fucked off. Like I just didn't put, I didn't put that kind of work in. I was kind of like that, but it was like that injury I had led me to just being in the gym. I couldn't do anything else. And then I always was hooked on like the activity of what I was like really in. So the gym just became my sport. Right. And it was like trying to, I don't know, get competitive in that way. Where I'm from, everyone's either in the gym, they're bodybuilding or powerlifting. And I did, I love the pump stuff, but the guys that were like hardcore into bodybuilding just like didn't appeal to my second nature.
It's a different hardcore, that's for sure. Yeah.
Like, I can't put that bikini on and squeeze my ass cheeks. But then you got the guys in the powerlifting corner, and there's just a smoky dust of chalk just filling the air, and they're lifting, I guess at the time what I thought was just unsafe, and they're just like strong as fuck. And I'm like, man, these guys are the most unconventional group I've ever seen. I want to be a part of that. It's kind of like the punk rock in me. Just like, I was like, I got to go over there.
I would say there's probably like a mix in that culture, right? Especially like if you think like late 80s, early 90s powerlifting. I mean, obviously you're not that old. So it's, but like, you know, what, that had to be what, late 2000s for you?
Yeah, and West Side wasn't even really booming at that time either. And that was like a trend, like during my powerlifting, that blow up of like bigger, faster, stronger. Everyone's doing West Side was kind of like halfway as like into powerlifting. So I love West Side, but I feel kind of fortunate too that I was introduced to like the very authentic, traditional, like original styles of powerlifting. And then kind of made those transitions into equipped lifting and stuff like that. But just hooked on strength, man. Like I was just so hooked on getting stronger, and I still am. It's just the evolution of that. I think that's why I got so hooked into flexibility training. It's like, the journey with you is realizing it's like, oh, this is all strength training.
Yeah.
And you start relating it to all those previous experiences and how you could have like a similar outcome in a different way. And that's what I think I get so obsessed about is, you get those results in the gym when you're new to the gym, and it's like you get obsessed with it, and you start realizing how many different ways and approaches there is to having some kind of physical result, and you just push your body to see kind of what you can do, and that's the excitement of it all, right?
Yeah, it's
like no one attains the splits because they want to say it's how you should train. It's like splits is a journey you got to be ready to go on.
yeah, for sure. Like that, you definitely have to be prepared to dedicate like a substantial part of your training to those specific goals, right? Especially if you want to make relatively like good, quick progress, I guess you could say. There's no really such thing as quick, but like quicker. You could probably like blend it pretty well with things and like just be a little bit more selective about your accessories and things like that. Like if your goal is to like really get length, like obviously you probably want to avoid like as much like smaller range of motion stuff as possible. Like obviously if you want to lengthen like hamstrings, probably like don't do rack pulls, like probably only include like Jefferson curls and RDLs and stuff like that. But you have to be prepared to spend time doing it, period.
And understand the process, like how your body may respond to it versus what you maybe think everyone respond. Like everyone's different a little bit when it comes to that, but
I mean, it's interesting because I've had so many phases of life changes during that time, and it was like I was like primarily CrossFit, and then we've talked about this before, from baseball, just like initially when I got into sort of CrossFit and barbell training, especially for the lower body, I just hadn't really addressed the asymmetries that I developed from basically just playing a single sport for 15 years in my childhood, right? From like basically 4 years old until 18. And it's like, and that's the only sport I really played, right? So like, again, I think like, no, literally like 15 years of my life was rotating to the left. I was right-handed. I threw with my right hand, which is a leftward rotation. I batted, right-handed, which is a leftward rotation, and I ran around the bases, which is a leftward rotation. So it's like it's all I did, right? Yeah. And so like when I got into like obviously banging around weights in the gym in high school a little bit, but like most high schoolers, not a lot of legs, mostly upper body stuff. So I wasn't really totally affected because I didn't really have to address and some machines, like it was like a local rec center, right? Like a small town rec center. But when I got into CrossFit, I definitely had issues with like initiating the Olympic lifts and then like a lot of the barbell work, simply because I would heavily shift onto one side and rotate into my right hip. You know what I mean? Just like the classic. And so it never really, like, even when I got into CrossFit, the big appeal for me was I was pretty good at things like rowing. And then I just was super fascinated with a lot of the body weight stuff in CrossFit. And that's what I excelled at, because I just wasn't that good with the barbell. I wasn't even that strong, you know what I mean? So there's also that, but, and that was like kind of what transitioned me more into just focusing on the gymnastics. And it was mostly actually because of the time I was doing CrossFit. And we've talked about this 100 times. And I think this podcast still exists. It's still a funny podcast to this day, but like I was doing CrossFit. So at the time, like there was the Barbell Shrugged podcast, which now I think they're just like a general training. I don't even know. Maybe they still do it. I'm not 100% sure.
That guy passed away? I thought the guy passed away that was doing that podcast.
I'm not sure. I know it was like a couple guys, like 2 or 3 guys, and they sort of like, let's hope not. I think they were like doing it together, They own like a CrossFit gym. So at the time, it was like primarily a CrossFit podcast, which I think they kind of over the years, maybe I don't know where the direction they've headed in now. Forgive us if anyone who loves that podcast listens to this and we have no idea what we're talking about. But the reason I bring that up is because I was doing CrossFit and Coach Summers was on this podcast.
I remember that one. Yeah.
And he basically just shit all over CrossFit in the podcast. And I just remember sitting there as a CrossFitter going, wow, he's right. Like that was my reaction, was like, it's like, because, I had spent so much time doing some of the other, let's just call it mobility stuff that was heavy in CrossFit at the time, with the foam rolling and band distractions and all these things. And like, while they always offered some acute relief for me, it just never really handled things permanently. And then I just found myself doing more and more in that, but not really like doing more and more in that and like going the direction I wanted to go. It was more like just doing more and more of that so I could just get by through each CrossFit workout and whatever. Yeah. And then when I heard him, and he was just kind of like, yeah, your mobility sucks and you guys should stretch more and whatever. And I was like, stretch, because I had spent a little bit of time in New York City, some girlfriends and whatnot. And I'm going to do yoga because that's what you do when you get a girlfriend. You go to yoga class with them. And then you just end up standing there the whole time, staring around like a creep because you can't do anything in the class. And then you just go, well, stretching doesn't work because I suck at yoga and I can't hit any of these poses and I certainly can't hold them. But because that's like most, especially like in recent history, like I would say like through the 2000s, like yoga had a huge explosion, right? And that was like sort of the flexibility, like that's how you got flexibility.
Yep.
But most men, obviously, like if I went to a yoga class in New York City, there'd be 60 people in there and 2 of them would be males and like 58 of them would be women. Right. So it's like not a bad draw for that, but it's a terrible draw if like you're actually trying to like make changes and you look around and you realize no one in here is like you, and you're like, okay. But anyway, so then I like was doing CrossFit and then kind of tried the yoga thing, but it didn't really work. And then it wasn't until Coach Summers when he said that, and I was just like, let me see what this guy's talking about, because I swear I've stretched before and it didn't work for me simply because I couldn't do it. And then it was a whole new level from there. Right. It was like, oh, no. I realized that I had never stretched before. Right. Like, I had never stretched before.
And I think there was a lot of us back then at that time. Like that's, I think, where we all found kind of community with each other, is because his impact in kind of calling all that shit out. Cause we had all mobility. I mean, it was really nothing until CrossFit. And then all of a sudden you had just such a large, just a large population of people wanting to move better. And it's like, oh, we need to deliver something, right? And no one really knew what flexibility training was, or even, know, how to apply it. And then if you do look at the gymnastics, that's where they come from, the most flexible, strongest athletes probably out there. They fucking stretch their asses off. So then you got Coach Summers laughing as mobility's growing. And he's like, what the hell are you guys doing? Like,
literally
stretching.
Literally. And like, I'm just glad that I was in a position where I had the awareness that I could be like, he is talking to me, but I could go, there's truth in this, right? Like, because a lot of people just reject it and say, and a lot of people did like, this guy's just talking shit. And it's like, no, like there was a lot of truth in what he was saying. And, there's a lot of history there with Coach Summers and CrossFit and the initial and all that anyways. We'll save all that because I kind of want to bring this back to the original point, but the flexibility work, a whole different level of upper body development that I've ever experienced. I think when I was doing like muscle ups and rope climbs, I don't think my lats had ever been so freaking just nice and round and developed, my upper back. Obviously we got into the handstand stuff, but like, it's definitely it's a specific body for sure. But at the same time, it's like, is it really? Because I think if you even just look at like a CrossFitter, if you look at like a CrossFitter who's been in CrossFit for, let's say 3 to 5 years, that's probably what I did look like 5 or 6 years into my training career. Like legitimately had I actually like done structured training consistently for many years. And then you look at CrossFitters have been in the game like 10, 12, 15 years now. And it's like the physique is on a whole other level. And that's kind of why I wanted to take it back there, because we have had so many transitions, and it kind of brings us into the conversation, which I'm sure we'll get to in a second as well, because there's like kind of a few points I wanted to touch on this. But the first one is like, I think a lot of people look at people's physiques and they go, they use this one specific method to achieve that specific physique. And while there is some variance in probably like powerlifters, bodybuilders, etc., on the very top end, if you look at most, well, I guess it depends on what are you looking at, geared powerlifters, or are you looking at natural powerlifters, etc. So there's obviously some nuance in this discussion. So no one rip us to shreds with your outliers of examples that I'm sure you're going to be able to find. But the point is like, you know, if you look at some of those cool black and whites from some of the powerlifters, like Roger Eastep and guys like that guy could be a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like he could absolutely be a bodybuilder. And the thing is, people, even during the 80s, like what people don't realize about Franco and Arnold and these guys is like, they were very much like hybrid athletes for a big part of their career. You know, like Franco did strongman, he did powerlifting, he did weightlifting. Arnold dabbled on that. It's like a lot of people attribute a certain physique, or they correlate a certain physique to a very specific training style. But what they don't actually realize is like their physique literally is just an accumulation of everything they've done to that point. And of course, there's periods of which they were very generalized, and then they also got very specialized. But even then, it's like, what really is bodybuilding training? You know what I mean? It's like, because you look at the sets and the reps, and well, there's volume guys, and there's single sets of failure guys, and there's guys that use compounds, and there's guys that didn't use compounds, and it just goes on and on and on. And it's like, is it really, it's like your physique now, like what you were saying is like, you look older. It's like, I wouldn't say you look older. I would say you look younger, but your physique looks
a
more
denser kind of
mature. Like like
denser,
you can tell you have put thousands upon thousands, thousands upon thousands upon thousands of hours into your body. That's what it looks like. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's like the primary difference. It doesn't matter how you trained in the past 15 years. Like it's your body is just simply a result of 15 years of training. And you probably could have trained one way or a myriad of different ways, and it would look relatively similar. You're just going to look developed. You're going to look strong. You're going to look, you're going to have the physique that you have. And it's like the lower body development. Exactly.
They played a role, right?
That's 100%.
I mean, that's like, I think that's more of like the essence of like longevity, is like when you realize that you can dabble and change and transition, you know, whether it's an injury, whether it's just friggin' boredom, right? You're like, man, I'm sick of this. Like, go do something else, pick up a different type of modality. And you're still like, that's kind of what's been, I think, so cool about the process over time where I am now in my life, is just kind of seeing how it's like, I found a way to kind of keep pushing myself physically and keep it exciting. And, you know, I mean, the old school stuff, it still is a deeper dive for me. I'm going harder and harder. You've seen that kind of evolve in the last few years, but those guys were like, that's the original CrossFit to me. When I think about them, it's just like, they were just like getting into it, and everyone's has this diverse background. Everyone's wrestling, everyone's working on conditioning, gymnastics and lifting. And like this just diverse population of athletes just figuring out physical culture. And then you saw it kind of dip, you know, into machine-based bodybuilding stuff. Everyone's
it was either like super commercial machine bodybuilding or like aerobic fitness, right? Like I wouldn't even really call it aerobic fitness, because if you actually understand like true aerobic capacity, it wasn't even really that. But it was like sort of like this. I mean, it was still aerobic fitness. It was like primarily, I cannot talk this morning. Primarily aimed towards women, right? Like during the 80s and early 90s, and so it was like kind of one or the other. It was like commercial. Arnold definitely contributed obviously to the commercial success of like bodybuilding. So that became like the primary mode of sort of physical fitness. And then it was like, oh, the women need something to do too. And it was like aerobic fitness, you know, step routines and like pseudo Pilates and stuff like that. Right. So, I mean, what is CrossFit really? I mean, it's just cross training. They just branded it as like that eventually became a specific sport.
And it kind of derived from military culture, right? Because
it really was. That's
tactical training. Yep. And those individuals are, you know, they do those competitions, but they train in that way where it's time-based, task-specific based. And then it's like, you know, what was it? Like the movie 300 comes out, and then it's like everyone wants this body and aesthetic. And I
think that was a big culture shift, right? For like,
you could even think of that
as 300.
No one talks about that, but that almost like, I remember that era of being almost like
when I saw
pumping
300,
iron.
I wanted to look like Gerard Butler, 100%.
Yeah, 300 is the pumping iron
I think
of
I like
the
wished
2000s.
this beard into existence because I didn't have a beard when that came out. And like, I saw that movie. I was like, dude, not only do I need to be that jacked and ripped, I need a beard like that. And then a few years later, here this bad boy just popped up on my face. So, I think maybe that's what I did.
300,
that's a good point.
300 is the pumping iron of the 2000s.
It really is.
When that shit came out, everyone grew beards. Everyone started doing CrossFit, tire flips because they
functional training.
I think it was Jim Jones was his trainer, was the trainer for those guys. I remember doing
he did like a Men's Health article on his whole training or something like that. I'm pretty sure.
Do you remember? Did you ever go through he used to have a site that was like CrossFit where he shared all his workouts. I remember doing that for a bit, and it was like 3 wads a day.
Yeah, it was a lot.
It was absolutely fucking nuts.
But yeah, it basically was like, CrossFit, like more or less.
There's no way. There's no way I can perform this unless I'm taking a fucking shitload of drugs. I remember just like getting through a couple of the workouts and I was like, holy fuck. But I remember getting in crazy shape doing that at that time. I was like transitioning a little bit between powerlifting and the military kind of stuff.
Right.
And it was, that I don't think we talk about that enough because 300 came out. Remember the 300 workout? It was like 25 reps of everything.
Yeah. It was like all kinds of different things.
That was ridiculous.
And that's so funny. I totally forgot about that. But when you brought that up, I was like, that's such a good point because that was like, when did that movie come out? That had to be
2007, 6, 5, something like that.
Something like that, right? We're gonna like Google it right now because
those guys had the CrossFit aesthetic.
2007. So it was my
2007.
Let's see if I expose my age here. That was my junior year of high school, which is perfect because I think that may have literally been the push for me to be like, I'm going to the fucking gym, dude.
Yeah, like you also just wanted to throw a fucking javelin, right? You just wanted, but they had that look. It's like all of a sudden they had like an athletic.
Every guy in high school was that for Halloween. You were a Spartan warrior.
Yeah.
But that's I was like, skinny as shit, but I was a Spartan warrior.
That's the Bronze Era look, man. Abs, shoulders, and arms. Their
no chest really. Smaller. Yep.
And yeah, they were like maybe not as isolated to the Bronze Era kind of training, lifting and stuff, but like that's all it fucking was to me. Like I think about it now, I'm like, yeah, that's the old school look. That's the aesthetic that, a lot of us still view as like a natural looking fit aesthetic, right? Where it's like, yeah, you look like you can run and fucking kill a bunch of Roman soldiers. It's like, that had a big shift.
That's a good point. Wow. I feel like I just had I had a moment of clarity there. That was pretty profound. But I think that'll like kind of bring us into, and I'll say this too, like, and I know you follow these guys, but like years ago I stumbled on Plague of Strength. Yeah. And also there's this other guy that I follow, his name is Mythical Strength. And they're kind of like the OGs of a countering misinformation in the fitness industry, like sort of against the mainstream, right? You had like the T-Nation saying that like, and again, like T-Nation was great, but there was a bit of a I guess you would consider them like counterculture guys. Like they're like kind of counterculture fitness is essentially what they are. Yeah. And their big takeaway message, because I've purchased both of their books and PDFs, and I've spent hours reading their blogs, and it's like there's almost an infinite amount of ways to the same place. You know what I mean? And it's like looking at their workouts and them actually going through the history of so many famous lifters and lifters we haven't even heard about just because they weren't commercially successful at the time, which I think is fascinating. Like just real physical culture history. You realize that so many people got to the same place in a myriad of different ways and different techniques. And just over their career, just so many different things, like different athletic backgrounds. A lot of them were like pugilists, boxers, fighters. So this was like even before like MMA became popular, right? Like a lot of them were just like legit boxers and fighters, bouncers, stuff like that. But they just did it all. You know what I mean? It was like, it's like on one end you have a shoulder workout that looks like it's all isolation stuff. It's, all your typical, flies and lateral raises and front raises and this and that. And then on the other hand, you got 10 sets of 3 push press, also a shoulder workout. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like that. It's like, those are the 2 different workouts that you get in this. It's like, here's some great shoulder routines. And it's like, holy shit, these are completely like opposite ends of the spectrum, but they do this, like they'll probably get you somewhat to the same. Like there's obviously some differences, but the point just being is like, it was cool reading those guys' material because you do start to sort of realize like not everything is as it seems. And like that's the thing I think what kind of sparks this discussion between you and I when I was finally, I was like, all right, we got to get on a podcast. Is like you see these fitness influencers who like have spent the majority of their training careers doing other things, right? Things that everyone else does. And then they find this thing that's sort of new that they sort of picked up on in recent years. And then they go, this is what I contribute to all of my. Yeah, exactly. It is called money. Yeah. But it's this new way of training that I'm doing now is I contribute fully to my physique or strength level as it is. And it's like, did you ever maybe just consider that like it's just an accumulation of everything that you've done up until this point, including all of those barbell compound lifts that you did for years that you say are not effective for building muscle, and that you just happen to be on the tail end of those because the thing that people don't understand about like physiological adaptations is they're not as acute as you think they are, right? Like all the acute stuff is like coordination, like fluid, like just holding more water, holding more fluid, getting more fluid to like the muscles, because now you're actually using them and they have to get, blood and fluid to them. Right. So it's like a lot of, even if you go week to week and you're like, oh, I'm PRing and it's like my strength's going up. It's like your strength's probably not really going up. Like it was there. It's just, you're getting more coordinated at doing what you're doing but what you're doing now, it doesn't mean that you're not getting stronger. That's also not what I'm saying. It just means that like, what you're doing now is going to show up weeks and months from now. It's not going to show up tomorrow or next week. Like that's not how training works. Right. And so it's like, it's funny how you get these guys that like their whole freaking career and majority of their physique is based off of a certain style of training that they just go in and they just start to shit all over because they're like, well, you don't need to do those. It's like, you're not allowed to say that unless you've solely built your physique on a singular method that you've done your entire freaking career. And like, if you've only, then, okay, I would say, okay, you can probably say that, but it's just such a weird space because people will say like, it's very popular right now amongst like compounds are terrible. And it's like, you like literally 90+% of your physique was built in compound training. Now it's bad. Yeah. Just because now you've put in another 3 years of training on top of the 12 you had previously, and you're seeing results, obviously, right?
You're able to keep going because you're not doing compounds, I guess.
Yeah, or whatever. It doesn't even matter. It's like, it doesn't even matter what the reason is. It's like you just accumulated 2 or 3 more years of training. Yeah. Like you could have probably done anything. And that's just it. And you still find that. You still get guys that are like, still getting bigger and stronger in compounds, and they're going, no, compounds still get you big and strong. And it's like, that's true. And then you get other guys that are like, you don't need to do compounds to get big and strong. And it's like, that's true. And it's just like in these guys, it's just a ridiculous argument because like, then at the end of the day, you just really go like, what is the commonality between these things? And it's like, well, training age, all of the habits that you're going to build over however many years of training. Yeah. Right. So obviously, like if you've been training that long, I can almost guarantee you've probably dialed in sleep for the most part. Maybe it's not perfect, but it's relatively optimized. Food choices are going to be relatively optimized. And I'm not saying we're not going to have like ups and downs and peaks, like again, because it is a very drawn out process that takes, it's again, we're a culmination of habits of like, if you really have an impressive physique, strength numbers, etc., it's usually like a decade plus of training. Yeah. And it's just such a bizarre argument. I think that's really what brought us to have this conversation, is because it's like you get these guys that are like, squats don't build quads. I'm like, really, dude? Because I never touched a machine till this year, and I've got bigger quads than most anybody that I ever have met, including physique competitors. So don't tell me that. And I literally only did squats. You know what I mean? Like, so I can be like, no, I literally only did barbell and maybe some dumbbell work here, like split squat or whatever. But like, it was predominantly barbell and dumbbell free weight leg training. Yeah. And then I still can go into a leg press and leg press 9 or 10 plates the same way everyone else can. I just maxed out the adductor machine, the abductor machine, the ab machine, the low back machine. Like there are actually several machines at the gym, the leg extension machine. that are literally worthless for me to train because, it's just so long that I've just spent training has accumulated to this point where now um, it's just showing up. Like it's just showing up later. You know what I mean? And so and there's so many variables that it's hard to really correlate specific things to one thing. And I think that's what just drives me nuts, and it drives you nuts because it's like everything that I've done up to this point has attributed to this thing. It would be impossible for me to really deduce any one variable down and say, oh, this was the variable, because it's not only is it impossible, it's always going to be hypothetical. Like even if you go into the optimal crowd and you say, hey, is there any proof or evidence that we can maximize any one single variable? And by maximizing that one single variable, we're now going to maximize our output that we get from that variable. So if we maximize one singular input, can we be sure that we maximize a singular output based on that? And the answer is no. There's no way to know because there's just too many variables. Like hypothetically, I would say it makes sense. Like hypothetically, like purely from just like a mental masturbation standpoint of like, oh yeah, if I line up my arm here and I only pull this direction, it hits these fibers and blah, 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 blah. But it's like, at the end of the day, I'm not saying it doesn't work, but I'm not going to put all my cards in just that one basket and say, oh, I just started doing these lat pull downs these past 3 months because some new PubMed come out and said that, this is the best way to train lats. And it's like, dude, like your lats are the way they are now because of your 10 years of training. It has nothing to do with like, you know what I mean? Like it's just such a weird argument, dude. And it's like, I don't understand how people just don't even question it. They just go, yeah, it makes total sense. Like
you have to want to become an informed consumer, which is hard.
Very hard.
It's hard nowadays because everyone's trying to sell you something. And I think what the unfortunate thing is that you, like, as we have done as well too, is you do have to come to your own conclusions through some of those experiences. Like you will have to go try this. Oh, I'm going to try this method because they said this, and then come to realization. It's like, yeah, it works, but I mean, the other thing worked too. Right.
Yep.
And it's like, that's kind of the process is where, you do want to try these different approaches and just come to terms with realizing like it all fucking works. But like, what are we trying to do here? And like, what's the goal? And like, that's where I think everyone just gets so, gets their head spinning in so many different directions because they're just not informed in that way where they don't have enough of their own experiences that hopefully those experiences should be mentored in a way where at least your coach or mentor is telling you, it's like, this is one way. And this is a way that I like to do things from, my own coaching experiences and things, but like, it's not the only way, right? It's like, this is the way we're going. We're going to try this. But if your coach is very dogmatic, some people respond well to that, right? It's like, you have to do this. This is the only way. And there's no other way to get it done. And it's like, you become very just closed into your own ways of thinking and doing things. And it is a challenge, but like, I think unfortunately, like you have to kind of come to your own conclusions. And, that whole fitness influencer message has been around since the Bronze era, right? Like if you look at those guys, you got like Eugene Sandow selling like a high rep system. It's like, he never fucking did that. The guy was like, he was an elite gymnast, and then like, he was like, training on rings and shit. And then he was lifting, and then all of a sudden he's selling you like high rep system with these small dumbbells. And it's like, you're going to help a lot of people. I get it, because no one's probably doing shit. So at the end of the day, if you aren't doing shit, you start doing something, you're going to get into some better shape. But to say this is how you got to where you are is just, it's wrong. And then you got like a guy like Arthur Saxon, who was the strongest of all of them, who just never did that shit. He just was like more into telling you how much weight he's using. And then telling you, like, he was telling you how he did it, which back then there wasn't enough commercialization around just being genuine for them to like give a shit. He was the strongest dude. No one gave a shit. It's like kind of sad when you go back and read about him. And it's like, fucking guy was insane. He was so strong, but like, he just didn't have that bullshit side to him where it's like,
where he just wanted to, where he He basically sold himself for the sake of
He'd get on stage and weigh his barbell in front of everyone and be like, yeah, that's 400 pounds. And then he would do something great and everyone's like, who cares?
But
right?
the high rep system. Yeah.
Yeah. But you come on stage with like fucking elephants and lions and shit. And all of a sudden everyone's like, oh shit. Yeah. Yeah. And you lift like 100 pounds. Right. It's like, but I think it, like what you do see nowadays though, is like guys like you and I, we do have a platform to create a message. And that's what's so great. And it's taken me a long time to even build up confidence to like sit here on a podcast, even though you and me have been friends for like so long. It's like, we talk every day. It's still more casual when I'm talking to you on a podcast, but even still now it's like sitting on a podcast and I'm like, fuck, like I'm not as, animated as like some of these other influences are.
Right.
But at least we have a platform where we can just learn to shape and mold that message that we think people need to hear, which, takes time, having podcast conversations like this, like, learning how to create content and push a message out that isn't as, I guess gimmicky or against the fucking story. It's like the story is the whole fucking thing, the whole process. And this is, just finding a way to get that out to people so that they are informed. They should be informed that there isn't just one approach, but unfortunately you have to come to those conclusions yourself. And, like you said, it takes a long time and you get to a point where you have had all those experiences. And it's funny talking about the hybrid model because I still obsess about the hybrid model as to like, what actually is that? It's like, you chatted with Alec. He's a good guy, man. He's a young
guy, very accomplished in his pursuits so far. Like I always respect any endurance athletes because we both will likely admit we're not the pinnacle or epitome of endurance athletes by any standard. I'm very much like a sporty, like if I do cardio and conditioning, it's very much geared because I want to like play a specific sport. And but like, will I ever, like, don't get me wrong. It's one of those things like I've accepted as like just part of fitness like anyone else. And I probably take it a little bit more seriously than most, but like, you don't see me signing up for marathons and trying to like beat Murph challenges and stuff like that. Like, it's just, I just have no interest. Right. Like,
well, even like studying those guys, you see how they've evolved from that being like their foundation too. Right.
Yeah.
It's like, having that foundation as like an endurance athlete and then getting into like heavy dose strength work and stuff. It's like, that's kind of like the CrossFit athlete. That's kind of like the pinnacle of what the best athletes have, this crazy endurance foundation. But I don't know. It's like, even still like thinking about like, how do you still, when we talk about all these pieces getting to the same thing, like how do you still have those low dose things into your training along the way? Right. Like even for me right now, it's like, my calisthenics work isn't like it used to be, but there's an appreciation for straight arm strength.
Oh yeah.
And certain things in my training that I still do that I'm like, okay, that's low dose enough where I still fit that need. And I think that's kind of like I don't know, like you try to present it in your own coaching. Like if you looked at a program I wrote fucking 10 years ago compared to what it looks like now, a lot of the same things leading you maybe to the same path in terms of strength, but there's like this low dose kind of experiences that I've had where I think these are important things that you probably should be working on if you haven't. But some people need to like dive right into that, right?
Yeah.
And that's where your introduction to flexibility training may be low dose. Like, yeah, you can do some stuff and make some gains while you're still lifting, but to a point, if you need real change, you may have to just like kind of what you and I did, like go hard, do fucking long static stretches.
Yeah.
Make a little bit of put a few things on the back burner, just a little bit, maintenance mode kind of thing. And, that's, I think a lot of people are maybe looking for a hybrid approach too soon in some scenarios, if they have a certain goal in mind. It's
for
like,
sure.
And you and I experience that a lot. People are like, can I do this, and this and get flexible? And it's like, fucking probably not, but
no, especially not where you're at. Right. Like, I think like, it's interesting. I think the human experience is just very repetitive. And I think like, if you like going all the way back even to what you said with the bronze era and the influencers and like what drives commercial success, it's like the things people will do for money, even if they're incredibly dishonest or whatever. It's like, And then, of course, people in society try to justify, well, he's helping people. So it's okay that he was a little dishonest about how he got there, as long as, like some people get helped along the way. And it's like, morals and ethics is a very individual subject. Let's just put it that way. Everyone just, it's like, okay, if you, then you, that's fine. I'm glad that you think it's okay. Yeah. But I don't. So, we're just going to agree to disagree there. But even just within the training experience, right? Because and this is something like Alec and I even touched on briefly, was there is sort of this repetitive cycle of like generalization, specialization, generalization, specialization, generalization, specialization. It just keeps repeating itself over and over and over. And it's like, that's for me. It was kind of like, I guess fitness was more or less specialized specifically for baseball, and you just did baseball. And then I generalized a little bit and I started training in the gym and doing things like playing basketball and swimming at the rec center and lifting weights and whatever. And then it was kind of like, oh, I'm going to join a CrossFit gym. And then I started very much doing like CrossFit WODs and Metcons, which also in a way is like very general, but it's also very specific to that style of training. And then from there, I kind of got, I guess you could say it's pretty generalized. Then I got into the more specialized like gymnastic stuff. And then even in when you just get into the bodyweight gymnastics, even that gets even more specialized. Mm-hmm. Do you just become the handstand person? Do you become the ring strength person? Do you become the skills flipping, tumbling, acrobatics sort of, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's wild how even within these, like just what you may already consider a specialization, it's like even within gymnastics, there's high bar, there's floor, there's rings, there's pommel horse, there's parallel bars. It's like you can literally specialize 8 different ways. And even in weightlifting, it's like, yeah, you only have the snatch and you have the clean and jerk, but there's snatch specialists, there's clean and jerk specialists. If you go to powerlifting, you have squat specialists, deadlift specialists, bench press specialists. So it's like, even once you specialize, you can get even more specific about like what you're going to do. And I think it's just a natural cycle that people need to, like, you need to step out into this general training perspective for a little bit to just regain perspective and say, okay, what am I going to focus on now? And then, like you said, you keep some of that stuff you were doing, you kind of keep it in a little bit to maintenance while you now specialize on this thing. And then it's like, then you just get a little bit more general. It's like almost the transition of like a power lifter from very little I've ever been involved in powerlifting. But if you just compare powerlifters in the sense of, they probably started out very general. Most of these guys were probably playing sports and got introduced to the lifts, or they started training in their commercial gym when they were teenagers with their buddies, and they realized they like to bench press. And so, what sport has a lot of bench pressing? Oh, well, powerlifting does. So I'm going to start now going from like kind of hitting barbell on like a chest day to now I'm going to start training barbell bench press 2 or 3 days a week, 4 days a week. And I'm only going to squat, bench, deadlift. And then they specialize for a heavy period of time, probably 2, 3, 4, 5 years of only doing those lifts. Again, there's some nuance there. Of course, they probably did some other things, but if we're just really focusing on like the meat and potatoes of the style of training. Yeah. And then what happens? They get really freaking good at squat, bench, deadlift. And of course, from being so hyper specialized, they probably start dealing with some secondary consequences from that. And so what does it force them to do? It forces them to regain a little perspective, step out, get a little bit more variation. And I think then that's when you started seeing all these like heavy specialists kind of get drawn to conjugate, because it's like, okay, they're powerlifting, but these are guys that are incredibly strong that have put hundreds, if not thousands of hours into squat, benching, and deadlifting. And now because they're so technically proficient and coordinated with squatting, benching, and deadlifting, they can now afford to sort of regeneralize again. And the acclimation and accumulation to like all this generalized training still contributes to the greater thing, which is going to be a bigger, fitter, stronger individual. And it's like, I think those phases just kind of come and go naturally. And I think if people were so like, if they could just, I understand it's like sort of scary and fearful in like a really pathetic way, because like how blessed are we to be scared about our like first world problems of like training in a gym and you know what I mean? But it's like, it's fearful in the sense that like it's a commitment you've made to a certain thing for so long. And like anything, now you're stepping away from it a little bit and you're like, what's going to happen? And it's like, nothing crazy is going to happen. You're just going to keep getting better. It's just, and you're going to do things a little differently, and it's okay. Embrace it, accept it. It's like, I'm fortunate that when I snapped my leg, I didn't just go, oh, it's all over. And I laid on the couch and I'm like, I can't squat. what am I going to do with myself? I'll tell you what I'm going to do with myself.
Maybe
I'm
for
going
a
to
day.
go in. Yeah, I'm going to go in the next day and I'm doing seated deadlifts and I'm training upper body. That's
Yeah.
what I'm doing. I'm going to do anything and everything that I can do. And it totally has changed how I've trained for the past 6 or 8 weeks,
Yeah.
both out of necessity, but also just like, why not? It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's like the identity crisis you face when you get into the fitness world, right? It's like, I'm a power lifter, I'm a strongman, I'm this, and you're just looking for identity.
I'm a PRI person. I'm an FRC. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
100%.
same with coaches, you know,
Yep.
and that's where I think, I mean, the influencer message too, that sometimes comes across dogmatic is part of that as well too. Is like a lot of coaches are trying to find their identity. They think that, you know, I have to latch onto this approach and then that's going to, you know, give me clients. Maybe it does for a bit, but then you realize to a certain degree, like they don't need that, just that one thing, or just that one thing is very limited. Right.
Yeah.
And then it's a challenge trying to find, because it's a challenge getting out of that mindset that you need some kind of specific identity. It's like, no, you just need more experiences, and you need to, you know, keep finding that thing that keeps you going so that you can continue to kind of go through that process of just health, fitness, and well-being. And like, you know, I think that's, yeah, you got to kind of have that obsessive trait, I think, too, to want to do that. But again, that comes through experiences, because I have been there. Like the injury I had in powerlifting, I ruptured my bicep. That did fuck me up. And I did go through an identity crisis there, because I went so deep and competitive with it that I just realized, like, holy fuck, like I kind of gave up all those other avenues to do that one thing. And I think the only transition, or the only option I had was to make that transition and say, I got to go do something fucking completely different. And then even that kind of got to a point where I was starting, like, that experience I had from that big loss in powerlifting, you know, the gymnastics, like you remember at the time, it's like we started embodying
body weight dad.
Yeah, we embodied it. Yeah, we embodied it to
Ring
a point
complex.
where it started to get a little too specific. And that's what I struggled with. I remember I took a lot of time off social media there, and you were like the only person that reached out to me. And you were like, are you all right, man?
It was a while, dude. How long was that? It had to be more than a year.
Yeah.
Like, I think it was,
it was a while. Like I stopped using it because I had this identity crisis again, where I was like, I'm not just body weight guy or dad. I'm like all these different things. And I wanted to, if I was to do it the way it's kind of been, you know, built back up, it was to showcase that message. It's like,
yeah, well, you know the crisis I'm going through currently then, because I feel like artist formerly known as Prince, because I'm the flexible, and people are like, why don't you stretch all the time? It's like, it's just not what I'm doing right now. I still understand it better than like 99% of people on social media. And I still have people that are doing stretch. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not that, but it's just like, you can't look at what I'm doing in training and then like base my whole identity off of that, or like my breadth of knowledge. It's like, what am I supposed to only post stretches on the internet because like even though I don't do them, but I still currently, but I spent an extensive amount of time learning that. And I still, it's like such a bizarre place. And it's like, so I'm already kind of like looking at a rebranding, and part of it is like, fuck, this is what people know me as. Like, and the height of my social media has been flexible. Like, that's what people know me as. So I like, am I kicking myself in the ass by potentially just kind of rebranding and just being me? Like, I'm literally just like, I'm just going to be Jeffrey Wolf or strength or whatever, not even strength culture, because that's not me. That's like this other brand and business that I've built. But is that going to kick me in the ass, or are people just going to, or is it finally going to give me a little bit of freedom?
Yeah.
Where I don't feel so restricted to like, I feel like I have to post stuff a certain way that's the expectation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And that's kind of what when I went through that period, that's where I was like, okay, wait a second. Now I have to post body weight stuff. Yeah. And you were going through it too, because you were 100%. Doing ring complex. It was like, wait a sec, we're more than this.
Yep. And
like people reach out about range of strength all the time because it is very isolated to flexibility. And when you hear the word, you think, oh, it's your range through your greatest or your strength through your greatest amount of range. And it's like,
all the
well,
time.
it is.
Right.
Well, it isn't. It isn't. To me, it's a range of your strength.
It can mean, yeah, that's what well, range of strength works because for me, I think range,
yeah.
I think of it both ways.
Like how many different ways can you express it? Can you do it old school? Can you do how those guys used to move, which requires flexibility? Can you fucking smash some ass to grass squats, which requires a good understanding of flexibility and a good understanding of mechanics? Right. It's like, can you, so it's like, that's more of, because I've kind of even thought about that too with like, but I think that message, it's finding that message where you can portray you, like, because you have such a broad skill set. And I mean, you have been a sport performance focused individual, which has been cool, because that's been like, for those listening that haven't heard that first podcast we did together, like, you were the first guest on the Range Strength podcast.
That's right.
And that still is, like, I think the top performing episode, because it was this unconventional approach to using flexibility with athletes that you were using ATG at the time when they brought you in.
Yeah, exactly.
And, I mean, that's always been, when I think of you and what you've done as well too, where you're at, it's like that unconventional approach to sport performance, where it's like this mix of all your experiences, which is cool as fuck to see. And that episode was dope because we got into like, I still don't think anyone's even talked about flexibility and sport performance like we did in that episode, because you were in it at the time. You were taking giants through. It was like the first
a lot of flexibility work. Right.
Yeah. And he has crazy results
and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. And it was just insane. And that was, there's been a transition and stuff like from that to where you're at now, but it's all still there. And so it's always cool to, when you watch a coach evolve in their practice and, go through those different transitions. It's, I mean,
well, it's like even today, we had the football team in this morning, and then we had a coach from Georgia, and then we had a coach from Stanford in here recruiting. And the coach from Stanford walked up to me because I had them first. They did hack deadlifts this morning. Nice. And they did floor presses.
Sweet.
So not even like full range bench press, because I'm afraid to post a floor press, because like God forbid you even do a bench press. You have to do full range, neutral grip, dumbbell pressing all the time, because that's how you get flexible shoulders, right? And then it's like, so then I did floor press, and then they did Zercher Good Mornings, and he came over to me and he was just so intrigued, because he was just like, he's like, is that like a Zercher Good Morning? Like he was fit. You could obviously understand, like, these guys are probably usually ex-football players, so they've been around training, like they know what they're talking about. And he goes, is that like a Zercher Good Morning? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, I really like it. He's like, because it just forces you to do the thing that you want to see, especially in like a training environment. Like a lot of, like, it's so funny when you get people on the internet, they're like, oh my God, that kid's form. It's like, dude, I coached 40 teenagers at one time, 40 teenage boys, by the way. Like, there's only so much you can really control without just being an absolute asshole, in the sense of like, not like a good asshole, like a disciplined, like sort of like, hey, get your shit together asshole, but like just an asshole who like just doesn't let teenage kids have fun and figure it out. Yeah. Right. It's like, I would never put these kids in danger. I would never put these kids at risk. Yeah. But he was just so impressed by it, because he could even kind of see like, dude, like the positioning that it forces them to carry, and the fact that they could still really load it up and hinge. Like, and he was like, I really like it. And he kind of just asked me like my reasoning behind it. And I gave it to him. He's like, man, I really like it. I appreciate you sharing, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it's such an unconventional thing to see in a high school football weight room. Like a Zercher Good Morning. You know what I mean? Like no one's doing that.
I don't think I've ever seen a young teenage athlete perform a good morning properly. All right. And it's like
a good morning, period. Exactly.
Yeah. And it's like always being prescribed. And you're like, what the hell? Like, you're going to put a barbell on their back. And it's like, it's just finding a way to get them to do the thing without, in those big group settings. It's like,
without ending up where they're going to end up. And that's either incredibly arched, or they're going to load that shit up so heavy that they do have the potential to injure themselves. Because it's like, even if I if I write on the board, work up to a 5, like a top set of 5 quick, maintain the speed, right? Yeah. Trust me, man, they're high school boys. It's going to go in one ear and out the other. And the second I turn my back, I got 5 or 6 different racks going. It's like there's just no way for me to manage everything all the time with every single individual there. And teenage boys are gonna push it. So it's like, how do I control the risk, quote unquote, in the sense of like, how do I get what I want, but how do I control it without directly controlling it? Well, I just use this really awesome variation that's been around since the turn of the century, if not before that. And I use this and to do the thing instead of like just the traditional whatever. But I don't even know why I started going down, why I was even making that point. Oh, just because like even sports training in general has been such a weird, like sports specific.
Yeah.
Such a, like how sports training has evolved the last decade in itself is just bizarre as hell.
Yeah.
So,
well, you're treating athletes like they live in a glass box now and they can't, do anything outside of this. And this is
like
where
every lift has to somehow resemble
perfection,
a shape or something that they do on the field, or joint positions and all this other nonsense. And you're just like, there's certain validity to those concepts. It's a very probably specific and niche amount of times with a very specific and niche person. But like at the end of the day, most of these kids just aren't that strong, period. So like once they get to the point where they're actually very physically impressive, then you can probably get a little bit more specific. But by that time, they're probably going to be far enough in their career where the weight room just is there to be there anyway. And they're going to be to the point where they're in college or they're going into the league and the primary focus of their career is 100% that sport. It's not going to be the weight room at that point. So it's like, I know I'm going to get all the sports scientists on here trying to rip me a new one. Like, oh, well, joint angles and the velocity of this. And it's like, shut up, man. Like, it's just, it's like, I deal with it with my rugby team and I love those guys, but it's like, I'm in a chat with them and it's like, they're sharing like rugby specific strength training drills for the scrum and this and that. And I'm like, dude, how about you just get like a deep ass strong squat and quit fucking around with exercises that look like this thing that you do in the game. Yeah. Right. Like, how do I improve my tackling strength? Get bigger, get stronger, and tackle more people. That's how you improve your tackling strength. So it's like, using what at the time would have probably been considered unconventional, but then I feel like the needle's just gone the other direction too, where it's like not every athlete necessarily needs to be in the splits or needs to, and it's like, it's just this constant, you're kind of trying to always play the needle. And I'm sort of counterculture attitude as well. Like if I had to be totally honest, I'm probably always going to be trying to find a way to go against like the mainstream thing. And it's because we just know where that comes from most of the time. It's like
dogmatic as fuck.
Yeah. And it's just based on like, it's just based on bullshit. You know what I mean? It's like everyone's looking at like the fancy packaging and no one's like looking at the core principles of like consistency, train within proximity to failure often as possible, recover the best you can, sleep, whatever. And it's the same with just like, actually, I was just talking to a member yesterday and I think you'll be able to chime in on this very well, because we've also both had periods of training where it's like, we're training bare minimum, but we're also like going balls to the wall training 2 days, 2 times, maybe sometimes 2 times a day or whatever. And it was like, she basically was asking me about someone had messaged her on Instagram and basically said she needed to be careful with overtraining and all this other nonsense. And like some of my beloved rugby teammates also were like, oh, I don't train legs during the season because then I just feel like my legs are too fatigued for me to run fast. And it's like, you're not even really that fast. Like, I don't know, like I love you, dude, but like, it's not that fast. So like, but of course they're always referring to this like 2 to 3 week sort of like transition window of just like this accumulation of fatigue where, okay, you're training. Yeah, you're doing rugby practice. Like, let's be fair. It's literally structured to just fatigue the fuck out of you. Right. And so it's like 2 to 3 weeks of that. And you feeling like, oh, it's the training. The training is just like fucking me up. And it's like, nah, probably not. And it's like, and if you can just make it was like somebody literally asked me, they're like, how do you like train legs, like deadlift and squat, like in the afternoon? And then you come to rugby practice. And I'm like, I just fucking do. Like, I don't think about it that deeply. Like, it's just like, to me, I just think of it as like, I don't have a choice. Yeah. Right. Like I'm going to continue to get stronger. I'm going to keep my fitness in. I'm going to continue to try to like add as much muscle mass to my frame as humanly possible. Yeah. And then I'm going to still show up and I'm going to fucking ball out as hard as I possibly can when I play rugby. And I'm going to hit motherfuckers as hard as I can. And I'm going to run as fast as I can. That's it. There's no other option, right? Because I think if you just accept, like, oh yeah, the training's really doing me in. Well, one, your training could probably be better structured anyway.
Yeah.
You're
not training hard enough to begin with.
probably not training hard enough anyway. But it's just like, because if you were actually getting bigger, stronger, and faster, you'll actually find that just like everything becomes easier anyhow, right? Even if you are just constantly getting fatigued. And it's just like, it's not an option. But the reason she brought that up is because she was like, oh, I want to just get better at deadlifting. And I was like, okay, we'll start deadlifting more. Right. Like, and I was like, how much are you deadlifting right now in your program? Because I have a signer program, but I manage literally hundreds upon hundreds of people, both in gym and online. And it's like, oh, just like really once a week, you're doing a deadlift issue. And I was like, okay. I was like, you can come in and deadlift every single session if you want to. If you really want to improve your deadlift, you can do that. You can deadlift every day. I was like, well, why couldn't you? Like, look, you can train like a moron 2 days a week, and you can train like a moron 7 days a week. And the person who makes stupid decisions is ultimately going to have consequences from those stupid decisions.
Yep.
But you could come in and you could train intelligently 2 days a week, and you can come in and you can train intelligently 7 days a week. But I promise you, by the end of the year, the person that's trained 2 days a week intelligently and 7 days a week intelligently, the person who's trained 7 days a week intelligently, you're going to notice a difference between those two people, like at the top end. I'm not saying, and I don't want people to say that I'm making the argument that you have to train 7 days a week to make progress or whatever. Like, there's a difference between like minimum effective dose and then just putting in as much freaking work as possible.
Yeah. If
you really actually want to get good at something. And I think we've both done that with when I learned muscle ups. It's like muscle up programming, bro. When I learned muscle up, there was no fucking such thing as muscle up programming. You know what I did? I showed up every single day, hard-headed as hell, and I just did as many muscle ups as I could possibly do that day.
Yep.
And then within weeks, I learned muscle ups, and within weeks, I was repping muscle ups. It's like there was no train this part of them. It was like literally go every day and do muscle ups and train pull-ups, pulling as hard and as fast as I could, and then do some pull-ups for volume because I wanted to, get bigger or what. It's like handstands. How did I get a 60-second double? Well, I'll tell you how. Handstands every single day. It's like squatting. How did I feel? How did you become so comfortable? You look so comfortable when you squat, and your range of motion. It's like, what did you do? Well, for almost 2 years, I squatted every single day. Sometimes 2 a day. Sometimes 3 times a day. And again, I'm not saying like you have to do that, but what I am saying is like, if you can devote the time to it and you're intelligent about it, you're only going to accumulate more progress towards this goal, right? And just, of course, she's so worried about like overtraining and whatever. And it's like,
well, this is where people get in their own heads about this concept of like a perfect program. Then the perfect program doesn't fucking exist, man. The goals and the targets exist, and you need to find the mentors and coaches that can guide you in that direction the way you see fit. Like, obviously they have to speak in a way, and that's, the same question comes up all the time for me. It's like, I feel like I'm at an opportunity where I can have a breakthrough in my front splits. It's like, okay, well, the energy is going in that direction. Our energy should be going in that direction. Cause it's because it's that conflicting feeling. It's like, what should I do? Because I got to make sure I do this. And it's like, well, that stuff can be on maintenance mode, and we can put more energy if we're smart towards this goal and target that we have. And that's just everyone wants to train like an athlete because athletes have perfect programs. An athlete has a perfect program because they have a sport that they need to put and devote all their time to. Right. And it's like, so they don't necessarily have those goals in the weight room as much. And that's where people are like trying to train like athletes, and they're like, well, I'm just kind of like doing everything, but not really making progress anywhere. It's like, yes, because you're not really like an athlete. Like, you got to pick those goals and targets, and we got to put that energy towards that. It's like,
unless you're literally like a strength athlete.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like these football players. And it's like the same message I have. I'm like, guys, these guys, they're not coming in here offering you D1 full ride scholarships that's valued at probably anywhere between $40,000 to $80,000 a year, plus whatever money you're going to make from NIL deals, and the potential to go play professional football because you're a fucking amateur powerlifter. They don't care. Now, they will still be impressed. Like the number one kid, the kid who's the number one center in the country, front squatting 400 plus, back squatting probably close to 500, deadlifting over 500, has only been training for a couple years. Has only been playing football for 3 years.
Yeah.
Weighs 300 pounds and was repping out chin-ups. And the Georgia coach was just like standing there this morning, just videoing him doing chin-ups, because this is a 300-pound athlete repping out chin-ups with, like, you think my thighs are big? This guy's thigh is as big as my torso. And he's not even anywhere close to peak physical development. You know what I mean? Like, put 10 years on that frame, that's an NFL superstar, hands down. Yeah. But it's just like, for most of those guys, this is just general preparation. You can go about it a number of different ways. If they're getting bigger and they're getting strong, and it's like, it's also kind of what I talked about with Alec, because it's like a lot of guys, especially like sports specific coaches, they'll blame training on like certain losses and adaptations that they make in the off season, like speed and stuff like that. And they're like, oh, well, they got slower. It's like, no, they didn't get slower. They probably put on a good 5 to 10 pounds in the offseason, and they didn't run a single week out of those 12 to 16 weeks. It's like, it's like, you know what I mean? It's like, and Alec made a good point. It's usually like, what did you not do where you're starting to, when you're looking at like where things aren't going right, or where you start to lose certain qualities, it's like, what did you take away? It's not really what did you add? It's like, what's missing now? And it's like, and that's the mistake that we made season one. It is when I got these guys back, was like, we didn't really do a lot of sprinting and plyos and stuff in the off season. Like, I kind of just took the traditional, like, we're just going to lift weights and whatever. And it's like, when spring ball came around and now they're running routes and they're starting whatever, we didn't have any injuries, but the guys were like, oh, my hamstrings are all this. And it's like, so I was like, what? Okay, we got to keep that stuff in. And they're like, hey, how are they doing this spring? All of them are like, I feel bigger. I feel stronger. I am running faster, because they are going to camps and combines and they're getting numbers. And it's like, it's just like, it all is just, you're just on enough of it's just general training. It's just general preparation training. It's just like, they're high school athletes. They just need to get bigger. It's like, man, I have a kid, his first day, he was dumbbell goblet squatting 25 pounds. He's the kicker on the team. All right. So give the guy a break, but dumbbell goblet squatting 25 pounds. Legs like Bambi. He's now repping 225. He's only been training for a little over a year. Yeah. It's like, the best thing that kid could do is just get stronger. Mm-hmm. Like, sports specific my ass. You know what I mean? Like, what are you going to do? Like, he's a kick, like anyways. But, and of course, like, I would say my training is probably at least more intelligently, like, I have a reason for everything that I do. Right. So like, anyone who dares attempt to challenge me on my reasoning for something, I can argue reasoning all day long because I actually have it. The ones you need to be afraid of are the ones that are like, I don't know, I just kind of threw it in there because I figured, it looks like what they do on the field. It's like, that's not good enough, It's still,
I'm even seeing it.
It's still going towards something, but anyways, I don't want to contradict myself, but
not even just football, but I mean, my oldest guy's 13 now. He'll be 14 this summer. And the thing that you're seeing with some of these sports that he's continuing to play is the drop off in athletes that can't keep up. It's that you just see the kids that keep their conditioning going year round, which has been, I think, more thankfully because we've kept him in multi-sport and he's always doing some kind of conditioning work. It hasn't been like, I don't necessarily get him to do any conditioning work, but the kids that play that one sport that doesn't have conditioning all year or whatever, you just see them as it gets more competitive. They just can't friggin' keep up, man. And it's like, like, you can't keep up, you can't keep playing. And it's kind of unfortunate where it's like that whole idea of like, they need to get stronger. It's like, well, if they can't keep up, then that won't do much. Like, you can't be strong and sitting back. Right. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just in general, I mean, unfortunately, physical development, especially in children, has just ceased to exist almost at this point, right? Like, you're fully responsible as a parent to make sure that your kid's physically active. Like, when I was in school, we did mile testing every month. We did testing. So we did mile testing. We did sit and reach. Your traditional, like, how many pull-ups can you do? How many push-ups can you do? Like, but at least there was something. right? Like where we had to go out and do our mile tests. I always finish like and for a kid who like played baseball to like to have like a between like I think it was like a sub 5, like a 5:30 mile or something, like that's not fucking bad for a kid who's in high school who's not like specializing in running a mile or whatever, you know what I mean? But it's like that stuff just doesn't exist anymore in physical education. So it's like these kids literally sit at a desk all day long. There's no, well, maybe not these ones. Like this school's not as like traditionally structured as a lot of American schools, but that's just it. Like you get a lot of kids these days, and it's like they sit all day long, and then it's like then they go out and play soccer for 3 hours, and it's like that's all they do. And it's like this is and this was like a pretty good example. I was talking to Moses, Moses Bernard,
Yeah.
because I posted about this in my story the other day, and it was like, how do I get good at something? And I kind of posted like a cheeky, like, you want to gain weight, eat more food for a long time. Want to lose weight, eat less food for a long time. Want to get stronger, lift more weight for a long time. And this is kind of like a cheeky response. And I posted it in my story because I just like stirring people up. But he responded, and he was like, he was kind of fascinated by the perspective that he gained when he was the chiro for a professional baseball team, because he's like, yeah, baseball players literally do 2 to 3 hours of, or that was part of, I included that in the post. I was like, you want to learn how to hit a baseball? Swinging a lot of baseballs. You know what I mean? Like, that's the only way you're going to learn. And he responded, he goes, I was actually incredibly surprised by like how many hours professional baseball players put into batting practice, like even on game days. So it's like we would go, when I played baseball, we would go and do batting practice for an hour before our game.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you think about it, for those who don't know baseball, you might get somewhere between 2 and 4 at-bats a game, which you're probably going to get an average of maybe like 2 to 6 pitches, something like that, right? Let's aside the pros where they play like 180 games a year, but even then it's not enough. But if you think about like, okay, you're a kid and you play baseball once or twice a week. Do you think you're going to get good at hitting baseballs if you get somewhere between, I don't know, 2 to 6 pitches per at bat per game? No, sir. You don't learn how to hit a baseball playing baseball games. You learn how to hit a baseball standing at the batting cage and hitting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of baseballs.
Yeah. That's
where you're going to get good. And that principle, and it's like even at the pro level, they're going to go out and they're going to play against, obviously they're going to get less than that because they're playing against pro pitchers that are literally like trying to strike you. Like they don't want you on base. Like obviously like that's the whole point, period. But like these are pros, right? These guys throw 100 miles an hour or whatever. So like your odds are even less, like the average baseball average is like somewhere between, it's around 250, which means that they get on base 1 out of 4 times. So the ratio, like it's not very good metrics, right? So it's like, if you want to hit a baseball 1 out of 4 times, you have to put hundreds of hours and thousands upon thousands of repetitions into that thing. And it's like, the more you can accumulate while managing the secondary consequences of just the volume of work, the better. Yeah. It doesn't matter what skill, strength, whether it's in the gym, in your specific sport or whatever. It's like, obviously there's times to reel back on certain things, but I would say it's reeling back on specific things, but it's never reeling back on everything altogether. Like very rarely is that actually the case, because it's like, even if you're getting heavily fatigued by the gym, do as much cardiovascular training as you possibly can. Do as much stretching as you possibly can. Do as much anything else that is just going to contribute to the greater thing that you possibly can. And you're just going to get better at it. If that is like your true intention, like if it really is to be at the top of whatever it is that you're trying to do physically. And I think it all just ties back to like, when you look at, you should post a picture of what you looked like 7 years ago and now, because there's going to be similarities, but there's also going to be vast differences in just your physical capacity. Like you've always had legs, dude, but your freaking hamstrings and stuff right now are just wild.
Deadlifts. I just attribute that to deadlifts, man. I have been deadlifting more in the last, I've been deadlifting since I started. Like the guys that come on there and say, you don't need a big back to deadlift. Like, you know what? Maybe you don't need to develop it, but to get a dense looking back and to get your erectors and everything, like, I don't know. That's what I've done. Right. And then even the hamstring side of things, like, what do you do for hamstrings? It's like, I do some leg curls, but I basically deadlift and stiff leg deadlift. And I've been doing that for like 20 years. Like there was a period there with the calisthenics work, you know?
It's like, even though you have a high frequency of deadlifting recently in different variations,
Yeah.
again, that's the point, right? It's like,
Those
how
have
long have
always
you been
been
deadlifting at a high level, Lucas?
20 years, man.
Yeah. So like, imagine, yeah, there is a lot of truth to this fucking young ass kid who gets in the gym. It's like, man, I just want to put on some hamstring muscle. And you get some fucking influencer. It's like, man, deadlifts aren't the way to do it. You got to do the hamstring curl machine, you know, and it's like, dude, he's been training for 3 years. He's not going to have muscle, period. Like, like he's going to have more than a guy that's been training for 1 year. And certainly those that have been not trained. But if you're comparing, because like everyone looks at like, what's the comparison? And the comparison is never like, it's always some unrealistic, crazy ass physique, right? Like obviously, because that's our dream is like, I want to look like that.
Yeah.
And they just look at this, the most brief recent window of time, and they attribute this brief recent window of time when really the truth is like, look outside of that and look to the big ass window of time that came a whole decade before that, because that's where like he got like what he is now from it like obviously again the things that you do recently contribute as well, but like you're like if you're really like you're gonna see that in a year or two from now. You're not gonna like you're not seeing that. It's not like again, it's not like, oh, I put on 5, my hamstrings must have grown significantly last week because I put another 10 pounds on my deadlift. It's like, no, that's not how that works. And that's what brought this whole conversation together, period. It was just like,
just the different, where do you find the right information?
Where do you find, like, it's hard. It's hard for people to go online, and I get it every single day. I get people that message me every single day, and this is generally how they start the question or the statement that they're getting ready to make. I am so incredibly confused because blah. And I'm like, yeah, no shit, dude. You're a consumer and you're confused. And the craziest part is you're getting information from professionals who are probably more confused than you are because they're more susceptible to being manipulated by the information within their field than you are. You probably actually inherently understand the things a little bit better and holistically. But the problem is that you now look to a professional who's just confused as shit. And you're confused as shit because they're confused as shit. And that's really like what's going on. Like if I really give my clients and members a little bit more freedom and a little bit more credit, because it's like, you know, it's, I got to pick on these guys for a little bit, but it's like, you know, I worked with the guy recently who had dove into the rabbit hole of like PRI and expansion compression, all this shit. And it's like, he just was not getting results, dude. But of course, what happened was they just took everything from him that he likes to do in the gym, right? Yep. And it's like, all I did really was just be like, hey, it's okay to do the things that you want to do in the gym. We might need to change a thing here or there. We might need to change the variation. But like, you throw a 101 mile per hour fastball and they don't. They're not going to have a fucking clue because they don't do what you do. If you want the results they have, do it by all means. You want to fucking, you know, do goblet squats for hamstrings and whatever, like have at it. But like, why can't you squat? You could come in. I've seen your squat. You squat beautifully. He has an amazing squat. It's like, why can't you squat? Oh, well, it's contributing to my orientation. It's like, bro, we're too far. We're too fucking far. Look at that person. And again, I'm not saying there's not outliers, but look at that fucking person right now and tell me you should take squatting advice from them. Nah, probably not. Okay, that's what I thought. I'm not saying that what they're saying isn't valuable, but we gotta like we gotta just, you have to trust yourself. Yeah. You have to trust yourself. And I think that like a lot of the people I deal with now, man, like it is mostly getting over psychological barriers in terms of like what they think they need to be doing or what they absolutely should be doing or what they absolutely shouldn't be doing. Like it really is much more of like just sort of allowing people to kind of just trust themselves. And it's like one of the main questions that I've started asking. I used to not ask this. Like obviously I'm always interested in my clients, but like one of the primary questions that I ask my clients, it's like, what do you like to do in the gym? Do you have favorite exercises? And a lot of times you're going to go, yeah, I do. I like to do this. I like to do this. And if I really think it's like we can't do that specific thing a certain way because it may be contributing to an issue that they're having, if they're dealing with an issue at all, because a lot of people aren't dealing with fucking issues. They've just been told they are. And it's like, okay, we can probably just change the variation. And at least you can get a little bit of this thing that you like while we work on some other stuff over here. But there's no reason like I should just take this away from you. You know what I mean? And I think that's just what's happening to a lot of people is like, I don't even think consumers are that stupid to be like relatively, like I actually really have more confidence in people than that. Like I really have more confidence in the sense that like people know what they want and they need.
Yep.
And it's okay to want whatever it is you want. The responsibility really does fall on the professional, right? Like it comes down to them. And it's like, first of all, you have to like, you know how it is. Like client relationships, it goes both ways in a service industry, right? Like I'm not just giving somebody to something and I'm hands off. It's like this relationship has to work for me as much as it does for you. And so that has to be there first and foremost. Like, do you even like training with the person that you like? Do you like them? You know? And it's like a lot of times like, no, God, no, I can't stand it. But they made me so scared of whatever. I'm like, yeah, that's where they got you. That's where everyone's getting used. They're just making you so scared of something. They're like creating complex problems to things that very likely have very simple solutions. And a lot of times nowadays, it's like just the ability to walk into the gym and train like a meathead again, because I feel like that's just gone. People are afraid to go into the gym and just lift weights and figure it out. You know what I mean?
I mean, like one thing, well, the individuals that do, I guess, get that messaging across that kind of makes people feel that way. I mean, they don't walk the walk, right? So you're saying, like, don't listen to that. But like, would you take squatting advice from that person? Like, do they squat? Have they ever even shared an experience or a result of someone getting strong with them squatting, right? Like, no, okay, it doesn't exist. So why would you even go that direction? So there is an appeal, I think, as a coach, like I've gone this way where it's like at the end of the day, like I think range of strength is this broad scope, but I have isolated it to the 4 areas that I think I can help people the most, right? So, you know, basic flexibility development and squats and more advanced stuff like splits, and then the old school stuff. And it's like, that's really where I want to teach as well too. And I think that's where us as coaches, we do have to get to a point where we do isolate it to like, what do we want to teach people the most based off of all these years of experience that, you know, you start off in this general kind of conditioning, get in shape kind of thing. And there is a way to do that too, right? Where you can you can have a very general message that's everyone just wants to get in basic shape comes to you and they like you, and, you know, but I think that's where the problem lies too, is like, if you're talking about squats and you just haven't put the time in to even develop a squat worth talking about or a result worth talking about, shut the fuck up, man. Even if it is good, even if the message is like kind of, you know, you make sense of it and you're like, yeah, okay, there's some good stuff here, but like,
no, 100%. It's, and that's like, it. Like, I don't want people
I do conditioning, but you know, I'm like, you just had Alec on, like, I'm not going to talk about running and getting to that kind of level. Like if I was to be like, listen, to get to a marathon, you need to stop doing that. And
it's the equivalent.
Stretch.
It's 100%
like, what the fuck
equivalent.
are you talking about? No, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Like, what are you talking about? It's like, you have no rhyme or reason except for showing a few pieces of evidence. It's like
some philosophical, like jargon, like some just rhetoric, you know what I mean? It's just like pure nonsense. It's like not even nonsense. Again, that's the whole point of it, is like, it's to say, like, then they take it personally. It's like, what do you mean? It's like this. And I was like, listen, I hear you. Like, I understand what you're saying. In fact, I think I actually understand it a little bit better than you do, ironically enough, which is why I understand that it's just not so black and white, dude. You know what I mean? Like that's like, even not even just like the optimal training, but even just this weird blend of like rehab to like performance. And there's still this massive gap. I think like there's still a huge gap between those two things. And they're actually so much closer together than people think. And it's like, man, you know, it's like when you get into the asymmetries and the hip shifts, like I made the post, like you can do a goblet squat with a hip shift, or you can squat 500 pounds with a hip shift. What do you want? You know what I mean? Because like, if you really think that you're going to ever, I've been as obsessed with it as anyone else, but it's like, I also had a point where I was just like, man, I had to just stop worrying about it. Like, yeah, you kind of microdose stuff in to sort of manage it and understand it a little bit better and whatever. And I think once you really actually do understand that kind of stuff, you go, okay, it's not so bad. You know what I mean? It's like not going to kill me. And it's like once you actually just accept that, it's people just, it's amazing how stuff just starts to go away. It's like because they just don't think they're going to get, it's like I have clients that like want to talk about scapular dysfunction and this, that, and the other. And it's like, they can't even press an empty barbell overhead. It's like, dude, you are so far away from worrying about scapular dysfunction. It's not even funny. Like I don't even know that we can have the conversation to say you do have scapular because you can't, you're a grown man and you can't press 35 pounds overhead. I don't mean that in any insulting way. I'm saying that is a serious fucking problem because, strength isn't the answer. Yes, it is. In that scenario, it is the answer. You need to get stronger, man. Like 36 years old, you can't press a barbell overhead.
These positions suck because you can't manage them under load.
You just don't know how to create tension, period. You are at the mercy of gravity. Like gravity, you are gravity's bitch because you just can't create tension.
Yeah.
You can't. Or you can only create tension in like one area of your body and like nowhere else. Right. Which is like really what happens to a lot of people, right? Like if we actually go into understanding like how people, why their backs and their hips and knees hurting, it's like, well, anyways, but no, I'm glad we had this conversation because I think that we both, and again, it's also because we're like best friends. And it's also because we have these conversations every single day. Just so people are like, I literally have Instagram probably has a whole data center with just our messages, right? They're just like, this is Lucas and Jeff's.
Hopefully they'll let us just like download that someday. And
it's just like on a cloud. Hopefully we can get AI. That. Yeah, exactly.
Here's 10 years of conversations.
Could you imagine what that would look like? That is insane. Oh my God. I can't even imagine what that would look like. That would be nuts. But it's like, I think we both have a very like just sound holistic training sort of model or worldview or whatever you want to call it, in the sense that like we do have the ability to kind of like dive in and then back out and retreat, but not back out and retreat in some sort of like spiteful way, right? Where somebody had their feelings hurt, they're like, fuck this system. It's like, no, I can legitimately look at any probably model that's presented and I can certainly see the value, but I can also see the flaws. And that's like the weird bridge between, I think, personal training and like group training, is I think then you can really start to tell like who actually trains people and who doesn't, because the people who train real people understand the incredible nuance, and not just for nuance sake, but like really understand that like all roads lead to Rome. Everything works for the right person. And, it's not always about maximally optimizing inputs and outputs, because we don't even fucking know if we can do that. And we never will. And it's like, at the end of the day, it's like, are you training consistently? Are you training hard? Like that was like, I just saw something, was it one of the big sports science blogs just posted yesterday that it was a post that talked about basically the reason most people probably don't see strength and hypertrophy.
Not training hard enough. They're stronger by science, I think.
That's what it was. And it was like, sure, they're training to like 8 RPE, but then if you actually like get down to the nitty gritty of like, but are they really? And it's like, no, they're probably still missing that marker by almost double. Like most people had like way more in the tank, right? So it's like ultimately what principles can you 100% guarantee on when it comes to training, right? And it's like consistency, intensity / effort, right? Because those are kind of in a way they go together, right? Proximity to failure, not always to failure, but certainly like learn what that is and learn how you get close to there.
Strength or flexibility training, both.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing, It's like, well, yeah, you're not going to accumulate any significant amount of volume just diving 100% into a stretch for 10 seconds. It's like you spend 2 minutes in a stretch and you go 50%, 60%, 75%, 85%. Oh, I got 30 seconds left. 90%, 95%. You know what I mean? It's like same principle. right?
Mhm.
It's just like we just changed the window, the scale, or how we are kind of like looking at how we measure that. But it's like if you just macro it out a little bit instead of just zooming so close in, same principles,
Thing.
and just like find ways to stay training and have fun.
There's no
And
finish line.
there is no finish
There's
line.
no finish line here, guys. You're not going to find a system that's like, that's it. I
That's
mean,
it.
if you do, it's because you just like it. Right. And,
Right.
you know, even you and I, you know, we've gone back to things that we like doing that we stopped doing. Like I did. Like I got back into lifting. You know, there was that moment where I was like, I'm not going to lift again. I'm like, no,
Yeah.
I'm back.
It's like
You
even
know?
like us, we love the barbell work, right?
Yeah.
And like if I actually look at like if I can look at the whole and I look at all these guys that get so fucked up from barbell work,
Yeah.
and it's like, where did it go wrong? And it's like things like the expansion compression model made me understand like where things go wrong. Why are these people experiencing the consequences they can? Is there ways to offset this? I believe there certainly is, you know, but there's also the line of like just, you know, it's like there's a difference between oh shit feeling my back and like feeling my back when I'm training. You know what I mean? It's like there are these things that we have to be able to communicate effectively, concepts we have to be able to communicate effectively. And it's like, you know, all these powerlifting guys, my hip, my knee, I blew it all out. And it's like there is a bit of like they just using a shit ton of weight, a shit ton of drugs. And also just like maybe biomechanically, that's just maybe not the best way to squat if like joint health and mobility and stuff is really like something that you want to consider part of keeping you healthy. Because like if you're always pushing everything out and you're just arching your back for everything and you lose range of motion over the time, and then you understand certain tissues and joints get consistently stressed, they're not getting introduced to any sort of variability whatsoever. It's like, is only squat, benching, deadlifting bad for you, or is only squat, bench, and deadlifting the way you squat, bench, and deadlift what's been bad? You know what I mean? It's like those are the conversations that we
Yeah.
can have and we need to have,
Yeah.
and I think they're way more valuable than because, knock on wood, I've never had a weightlifting training injury in the gym ever in 15 years.
Mhm.
Maybe it's a little bit of luck. Maybe it's a little bit of just like I've lashed on to people that I've been fortunate to learn from and mentor from very early, friends that have made mistakes that they're like, just be careful with this thing. And I'm like, okay. And you know, and it's like, I think at the end of the day, yeah, it's there's a lot of obviously fear mongering, and it's like fear sells. Like, let's just be honest, fear sells. And ironically, everyone who sells fear also sells a solution,
Yeah.
you know, and it's like there is no one way.
No.
There's no one way ever. Even at the top end of performance, and oh well, once you get to the top, it's all pretty much. And it's like, no, it's not, dude. Like, give me every Mr. Olympia that's ever stood on the stage and show me their training programs. They're not even going to be remotely the same. You know what's going to be the same? The drugs that they've
Steroids.
done,
Yeah.
the food that they've eaten. But in
Yeah.
terms of like training, it's
All different.
so variable. You know, C-Bomb
Yeah.
trains a completely different way. That doesn't mean you need to train like him. No, it means train like how you want to train.
Yeah.
And optimize as
learn.
many of the variables as you can for a long time.
Try all those things, man. Like that's how, I mean, I've gotten to where I am now, where I've tried enough things to know what I like. And I know I'll probably still try different things. Yeah, at some stage. I know something else will come up I'll want to get into more. I'm actually doing upper body plyometrics more now than I ever have, just for the shit of it. Cause I was like, I've never really, it feels like it fits really good with old time lifts. Like if I'm doing, you know, like the one hand stuff, I'm like, man, instead of benching, I'm going to go hard on some body weight plyo work. And, you know, I mean, I've done them in the past, but like doing it in this way is a bit different. And it's like, you're always just kind of dosing things in a bit differently or experimenting in a way, right? Like maybe you don't do C-Bum's full program, but maybe you just like add one of his protocols into the mix one day. Right. And it's like, you learn from all those experiences. I still do things, you know, that I was originally taught in powerlifting 20 years ago. I still have certain traits and things that I do from that time. And I mean, that's really all it is. It's like, just don't be, take the deep rabbit holes and learn from them, but don't come out of them thinking that it's like, you know, it's a piece. It'll be a piece for the long haul. And
the stability in all of it is the like the underlying like actual principles.
Yeah.
Right. Not what people are saying are the principles. These are the principles of my system. No. What are the actual underlying psychological, physiological, and environmental principles that have contributed to your success or contributed to where you are now, and that will continue to contribute, because those things will not change. The methods will change, the perspectives will change, and I won't even say they'll change. Let's just say they'll get recycled cyclically over and over and over.
Yeah.
Really look down at what are the principles of why these things work, and understand why, and try to understand why they wouldn't work for some people. And it's like,
yeah,
I won't say who, but I worked for a system where all they ever did was look at why what they are doing is working.
Yeah.
They never wanted to confront why what they were doing wasn't working for the equal, if not more, number of people. I understand from a business perspective, like as a growing business and things like that, it's like you have to, you obviously want to double down and bias on the things that are working for people.
Mhm.
But if you're actually looking at the total population of who's affected by what you're doing, and you have a vast amount of population of people that it's not working for, if you're not going to look at it, get someone to look at it and understand it better, because then you are actually going to be able to help more people, more, not just like as a net level, but like as a, like from a ratio perspective, like, okay, instead of helping 3 out of every 10 people that come to me, I'm able to help 5 out of every 10, and then 6 out of every 10, and 7 out of every 10. You're never going to be able to help anyone, but like scale that ratio up. And I think just, again, the more tools you have in your toolbox and the more holistic understanding you have about the principles of when those tools are to be used, the more effective that you're going to be. And it's
just remember that just remember the reason that you're hitting a tire with a hammer is because Gerard Butler starred in a movie called 300, and
they put that as the workout, and so you're out there fucking doing it. Yeah, exactly.
No,
you know what I mean? It comes from somewhere.
300 was sick though.
No, it was sick. And look, most people should probably just get the fuck up right now and just go start hitting the tire.
Just go watch 300, man. Go
watch 300. Start there, and then you'll start hitting. Yeah, exactly. So
every time you start to lose motivation, you just go put 300 back on.
What does he say? When he asked the Greeks, he's like, "What is your trade?" or whatever, and he's like, "I'm a painter, and I'm a philosopher," or whatever. And he's like, "Spartans, what does he say? What is
your profession?
What is your and you're just like, no?
Like, what you need, man.
Get you fucking jacked every time, right?
We need more. Yes. We need more people wanting to get out and be fucking badasses, and enough of this fucking.
Well, it's a great.
You know what I mean?
It's the equivalent. You got a bunch of philosophers pretending to be warriors.
Yeah.
And you got a bunch of warriors pretending to be philosophers. But at the end of the day, fuck, I'd rather be a warrior pretending to be a philosopher than a philosopher trying to be a warrior. You know what I mean? Like, you're just going to get more shit done.
Whatever road you take, if you're going to dive into something new that you think has a solution for you, just don't let it fucking hinder those components that we talked about, you know, like intensity, strength, like keeping those things at the forefront. Like, you don't have to stop doing a lot of shit to do something. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's not the solution. Like, I think that's probably where you hit home a little more too with people, is like, the solution isn't just to stop. It's just to evolve that and to change it and see where the holes lie. Right. And
be comfortable with it. It's okay.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, again, and like, look, have your moment, right? Like, have your moment of like self-pity and sympathy, whatever, but like, get to work pretty quickly. You know what I mean? Because I could have sat around and been like, look at me. I spent an entire year getting ready for rugby, you know, and then I break my leg 2 games, my last, like, third to last game or second to last game or whatever it was. My team goes to state championship. I wasn't able to participate in that game. We still ended up winning. And it's like, it was a tough day, because I'm like, man, I should have been out there. But at the same time, I had to step back and go, you know what? I showed up to practice. I showed up to every preseason game. I showed up to every single game during the season. I gave it my all, and I did contribute to this greater, bigger thing. Maybe I wasn't there on the field that day. Tough luck. That's how it happens. But it still contributed. And like, your sort of training journey is not going to be any different, right?
No, absolutely.
don't necessarily pivot for the sake of just pivoting, right? Based on like confusion or fear, but understand when you are just faced with the moment of like, hey, I want to try something different. I want to do something different. Like, just make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons and understand, like, no matter what, as long as you keep those, again, those basic principles that we've talked about here in, it's going to contribute to the bigger thing. You're not losing out. You're not going to lose out. There's no real way to lose as long as you just keep the needle moving. And and if you just accept it, like, you're going to reap the benefits of of fitness and training that most people will never touch because they can't make those transitions into new things or different things or trying different styles. Like, boredom is going to hit you. And I'm sorry, most people are not intrinsically motivated. We are extrinsically motivated for the most part. So it's like, I understand the appeal of shiny new things, but don't go to shiny new things because somebody tells you it's the better thing or it's just a different thing.
Yeah.
And if like, it's okay. And again, and if you look at most of the most successful people in physical culture, they've done a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
They've done the powerlifting, they've done the bodybuilding, they've done the weightlifting, they've done the cardiovascular training to some capacity, they've done plyometrics, they've played sport, they have done so much stuff that has contributed to where they are now. And don't just take brief windows of time and high moments that you see on Instagram, because everyone just posts high moments, like the best moments. You think I'm going to post my most vulnerable moment on Instagram? Like, yeah, I broke my leg, I posted about it. That's not like a massively vulnerable moment in my life, right? Like, it just sucked. Well, there is a bit of like, of course I had people like, yeah, see, that's what happens when you're an asshole in the gym. It's like, dude, I didn't even break my leg in the gym, moron. You know what I mean? Like, what are you talking? But anyways, it's just like, don't be afraid, guys. Training at the end of the day, like, if you really want to be in this a long time and you really want to pursue lofty goals, because people do come with some big goals, it's like, just have fun and be patient. And like, yeah, really weigh where and who you're getting your information from. And I'm so tired of this narrative of like, well, people shouldn't reflect, their philosophy. It's like, yeah, I'm sorry, dude, but I'm not buying a nutrition plan from a fat nutritionist. I'm not. I'm not going to the gym and hiring a trainer who looks nothing like I want to look like.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not. I'm gonna look at the person who has made some practical use of the information they have. And I absolutely believe that practicality exceeds the value of almost anything else when it comes to this industry and field. And no one can be you in your body, and your experiences are as important as my experiences, plus all the experiences that I've had with all of my clients and Lucas's clients over the years. It's like, your experiences matter too. And don't be so easy to persuade and get pushed around. Hold your position on things that you feel like are fun and you want to do. And it's like, quit letting people scare you away from that. It's like, there's always a workaround, don't
abandon your experiences, right? Like, that's where it's like, because those will always help you make choices or shape a new experience from those previous experiences. And like, as you're going through it at the early stages of training or being a coach or just going through that process, you'll probably feel conflicted with old experiences. Like, they weren't right. It's like, again, everything fucking works. Yeah. It works for the time you used it and for what the intention was at that time. There may have been some, I've done stupid things. Things,
sure.
But again,
for sure.
Like, again, at the end of the day, it's like, I mean, look at half of the CrossFit workouts that, swim across the fucking Atlantic Ocean and come back. It's like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's,
twice about it.
You can't obsess about that shit. You got to have those new experiences, relate them to your previous experiences, and keep all of those with you, right? Like, that's at the end of the day what the whole journey is.
Yeah, I think that's a good place. It's a good place to stop it. I know it's been a while since we've done this. I think that we got to definitely do it more consistently, because I think this is just like kind of the direction I want to take the podcast is like, this is what we do. But I think it's just so important for people to kind of come in on this journey and experience too, because then people kind of see where we're at, because like people will look at, and it is hard. It's like, I haven't really posted that much regarding my training for like the last 6 or 8 weeks. So it's like, people don't even really know how I've been training. And it's like, people would probably be surprised to know that I've like primarily trained on machines for the better part of like 6 to 8 weeks.
You and I probably don't talk enough about all the fucking things we've done or we do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I don't talk a lot about cardio.
Well, it's like, I was before I broke my leg, I was literally doing what? Squat, bench, deadlift, overhead press. That's all I was doing. Like, and then throwing in some random accessories. And then it totally pivoted to like the exact opposite almost. Like I'm still been doing deadlifts, but
that's the message you get all the time. Is this what I should be doing? It's like, well, this is what I'm doing right now. And this is helpful. Yeah. But that message that we've talked about this episode where it's like, you know, there's so many different ways and we've kind of gone through them. Like finding coaches that preach that message is harder and harder. And I know it's also because it's harder to share a broad message. Because when I post on social media, I kind of have to almost isolate where people follow me the most from. They follow me the most from, you know, this guy who's pretty strong and has good size and has range.
Yep.
And does some unconventional things. But it's like it all came and stemmed from this like broad journey through, you know, all these different types of training disciplines. And it's a hard message to get out there without just being very isolated to kind of, you know, get that outreach. But
I've kind of transitioned to just communicating to people when they come into my space more or less is like, hey, I'm probably not here to necessarily teach you or tell you anything you don't know. I feel like my role is to just offer you my perspective on what you already know. It's not to make you wrong about what you know. It's not to invalidate what you know or have learned or have heard. It's like, okay, I hear what you're saying. Let me just offer you a perspective on it. And then you take that and you do what you want to do with it. Absolutely. And I think that's kind of the position that I've now tried to take instead of being like, this is my system and this is my method and this is my way of fucking doing things. And if you don't fucking like it, fuck off. No. It's just like, well, maybe. No. It's just like, look, I have over a decade of experience in the industry professionally and more than that as just a hobby. Training for fun and playing sports. And like technically my whole entire life has been devoted to that one thing. So this is the perspective I offer you.
Which is just as important.
Which is my own unique personal experience mixed with education and continued education and understanding of certain concepts. And it's like the ability to just bring all of that together because I think you are seeing this surge of like people aren't even really selling results. Like if you really go and look at programs and systems and whatever, it's like most people aren't actually really selling results anymore. It's a hell of a lot easier to sell a philosophy because a lot of people can sit around and talk about shit. It's very easy to do. Just sit around and like come up with these cute ideas and then like hope somebody else does something with it. It's like most people that I've seen pivot to like selling a model or a system but they they haven't even really got anything from it other than other people to go, wow, that's a really cool model and system. Let's sit around on the internet and talk about this all day. And it's like, I'm guilty of it too, but I also still own a gym. I also still train people both in person and online every single day of my life. Like this isn't just, I don't make a living off of podcasting. I don't make a living off of selling courses on programming. I sell perspective and it's not going to get me millions of followers. It's probably not. But I think in time, like you and I kind of have the same of like, it will build like a genuine, loyal community and following. And because most people that message me are not the people that are going to be buying ATG or buying FRC, where it's like, I saw your advertisement and where you said like, how badly destroyed your body was for years and how you found this secret solution to all your problems. They go, no. Almost all my messages from people who sign up for my stuff go, hey, I have followed you for months.
Yeah.
And I've listened to the things that you've said and I've watched the things that you've posted. And a lot of times
I've tried a lot of quick fixes and they didn't work.
And here I am.
Because that's important too. You know what? We're not saying don't try that stuff because sometimes you got to fucking try it to know that it's like bullshit or
absolutely.
It's maybe even it does help you and you gain some perspective from it, but you know, there's no quick fixes, man.
No, not at all. So I'm sure you got things to do today. I definitely have things to do today. As much as I like would love to just do this, You
Yeah.
get paid to do this. Because this is really one of my favorite things. I think like the most value that I've gotten out of this industry is networking. You've been my best friend. I mean, my best friend, have been for almost a decade. And I always enjoy sitting down and having these conversations. And I've always valued, this relationship very highly, just personally and professionally. So I'm glad we were able to sit down and do this. I'm sure you guys know we didn't really do introductions because shit, we don't need to, right? We all know who Lucas Hardie Range of Strength is, but if you guys don't, where can they find you, Lucas?
Yeah, Instagram's the best platform. I've been ramping up the YouTube as much as I can because it's that long form messaging's, that's Instagram's not quite the place for that.
No.
And I think that's how you get that message out a bit more clear for people too. But
and to the people that are worth it because they're gonna take the time to digest it.
Yeah, that's why I like YouTube so much. Like someone will actually watch your shit for a little longer than 10 seconds. And
I think that's why podcasts are so good too, because
exactly. Yeah.
if someone's willing to sit down and listen to this conversation, those are the people that you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. No, but I'm sure you'll see, if you're following Jeff, you'll see us collaborating more with, the Fellowship of the Range with Emmett is like the other podcast. We try to get episodes in when we can get all three of us organized, but
because he's on like a retreat right now, right? He's still on a retreat.
I think he's home now.
Is he home now?
I'm hoping to swing through when I go to UK at the end of the month. So
good.
That'd be cool.
It'd be good to see content from that.
Yeah, the Church of Range. He's got that all up now.
I know it's going to be so cool. We'll keep any potential plans for that under wraps right now. Maybe we'll expose it once we talk to him on the Range of Strength podcast or the Fellowship of the Range podcast. But guys, I appreciate you listening. I'm sure it's going to be quite a long podcast. I haven't even checked to see how long it is, but it doesn't matter because I know this is going to be like, I love all my guests, but the reason I've been so like, I've been kind of telling Lucas we need to do it for a while, and we've both had our reasons, but I know that this is going to be a hit. So many people have asked for it, and it's like, I don't even think I haven't even like teased the fact that we've done this. So this is going to be a nice surprise for people, and I know it's going to be a huge hit. So hopefully
it's a good one. I think it's a good one to reshare that first one we did, man, because I mean, that's still a banger. That's such a good podcast.
Yeah. It will be interesting it'll be interesting for people to go from there to this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause that was when you and I were briefly kind of catching up when I guess I had been with ATG for a little bit, but that was really like picking up then.
It was when things were getting a lot of momentum. There was a lot of momentum building, and it was like, that's cool. Yeah. Thanks for having me, man.
Of course, brother. Anytime, you know that. I'm sure I will talk to you very, very soon. Couple minutes.
I hear him chat to the noise, move too quick, can't stop for the talking. I hear him chat with the boys, man so tough, but man's keep caution.